So as far as FHA also, there are two different parts to the approval process. And what I mean by that is, and this is another really cool thing about FHA, is similar to VA, we run it through the automated underwriting system, which is called an AUS. Often lenders will refer to it as a DU or an LP, which pretty much just means who the loan is insured by. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, but they basically insure our loans essentially. And so LP is a Freddie Mac loan and DU is a Fannie Mae loan, pretty much, right? But with FHA, you can run the loan through like the automated system to get the approval, but you also can do it manually. So this is like 1985 loan stuff where the underwriter's like sitting down with a file, not legitimately because we're paperless, and going through and underwriting it, literally signing his or her name to the approval, and the underwriting automated system gave a denial. And so it won't go through that way, but you can do what's called a manual approval, and by doing a manual approval, it's more of an aggressive underwriting style, basically. And again, a lot of lenders, not to promote cross-country here all day, but it's something that we allow, which saves a lot of difficult deals. So as far as student loans go, with FHA, if their student loan is deferred, we have to use 0.5 or 0.5% of whatever the balance of that student loan is into their debt to income ratio, even if the loan is deferred. So that's kind of how FHA differs than conventional with student loans, which is a big part of it. Also, the mortgage insurance with FHA is the same for everybody. The only differentiation is that if someone puts down 3.5%, their mortgage insurance is higher than if somebody puts down 5%. But if they put down 10% or 20% or whatever the case may be, their mortgage insurance is still the same. And so, again, automated underwriting approval or manual approval, interest rates don't change based on credit score or property type or any of that type of stuff. And the kicker of it all is you can go up to a 57 or 56.99% debt to income ratio. So using it as an example, depending on the interest rate, someone on an FHA loan may qualify for $300,000, where that same exact loan conventionally, they're only going to qualify for, let's say $225,000. So it's a big variance in, debt to income ratio. So the debt to income ratio is pretty much what we use to determine what the client qualifies for, utilizing their gross total income. So you can add child support to that. And by the way, child support income, which is a very common thing that a lot of people don't know, is you do not need court-ordered child support to use that income to qualify for a loan. So if a wife or husband has a gentleman agreement with the other party or spouse, co-partner essentially, as long as they show a 12-month receipt of that income and the birth certificate to show that the child is not going to be 18 within the next 3 years, we can use that income simply with a notarized document from the other person saying, like, I've been paying my girlfriend, $500 a month. I've been paying her for 2 years. Here's my last 12 months proof of that, or she provides that to us. We could actually use that as income. That's a very common misconception that a lot of people don't know. So when I say all income, I believe that when you're taking the BFI from the client, you should obviously get to know their situation and figure out all of their income and disclose that to your lender so we can determine what we can use and what we can't use. Kind of like asking them if they were in the military or not at the beginning as well. That's a big miss on a lot of lenders' part, is the military thing, big time. And so if you have the client's pay stubs in front of them, we calculate the income differently based on if they're a fixed income worker, which I'll explain what that means in a second, versus a variable income worker. For example, if you have a home health care nurse or just a regular nurse, their hours may vary. They may have differential pay, shift differential, things of that nature. And so we're going to take that income over the amount of 2 years, in most cases, and we're going to average that combined. So an example would be, and this is another issue that comes up at times. Let's say you have a nurse and in 2 years she was out for 4 months because maybe she hurt herself at work and she took workman's comp or temporary disability for 4 months. So then what happens is the lender would take the total income and they would divide it over 20 months. But that's because they would say, hey, she didn't work for 4 months. But that's actually not how it works. We're going to take that total income and we're still going to divide it over that 24-month period of time. And so it's important to know that because sometimes people have gaps in employment. So that should be another question. When you're taking their history, you say, hey, Mrs. Sanchez, when did you start your job? And she says, oh, I started in April of 2020. Great. Your follow-up question should be, have you ever had any periods of time off more than 30 days or greater than 30 days? We're going to want to know that. That's super important, and it's a big miss, I feel like, sometimes. That's super important. Fixed income is when someone is like, let's say, a teacher, they receive a salary, or they always work 40 hours a week, or they always work 30 hours a week. It's consistent in their income. We're technically going to take those pay stubs. If somebody gets paid weekly, for example, we're going to add them up by 52 weeks. We're going to divide by 12 months, right? Or if they get paid 10 months, we're going to do the same calculation. We're a variable employee, like union workers, pretty much anyone that is not working the same amount of hours every single week, which we're going to balance based on their year to date on their pay stub. So we're going to notice it, I guess is my point. We're going to average that income. And so a good way to do that is if you take, when you're taking the application of the BFI, you kind of want to break down the base income, the overtime, the differential pay, the bonus income, because let's say you have somebody that makes $80,000 a year, right? But their salary is only $60,000 a year. Last year they made $80,000 because they got a one-time $20,000 bonus, but the year prior they didn't get a bonus. We may not be able to use that income because they don't have a history of receipt unless on the verification of employment it states that it's likely that they're going to get a bonus of that size again. So any type of overtime, commissions, things of that nature, we're looking for a 2-year history because we're looking at the history to show the continuance. And unless they have that, we're going to want the employer to verify on the verification of employment that those things are going to continue. So if you recall, we went over front debt to income ratio is your PITI, or your payment, interest, taxes, and insurance, and mortgage insurance, right, if applicable, right? And you're going to take that and you're going to divide that against your total income. So hypothetically, if you have a client that makes $4,000 a month gross income and their mortgage payment is, let's say, $1,200 a month, you're going to take the $4,000, you're going to divide that by the $1,200 mortgage payment, total mortgage payment, right? If it's a condo, association dues would be included in that, and that would be 1,200. Do the math for you. That would be a 30% front ratio, right, which is allowed. So on FHA, if we're utilizing an automated approval, the front ratio most of the time will not go through the automated approval higher than 45, which is like really high, honestly. Conventional, your front ratio and your back ratio get looked at the same. So there is really like not a front ratio in the equation on a conventional approval. It kind of has to go through the system, and it cares more about the back ratio. And the back ratio, again, debt to income ratio that we talked about a little bit earlier, was the housing payment plus any debt on their credit report, which would be credit cards, car payments, things like that. So if a client asks you, hey, my cell phone bill, do I need to add that into my debt to income ratio? No, because we're only going to be looking at what's on their credit report. And on, just to kind of clarify, just to have it in for their editing purposes, the USDA, the max ratio is 43. There are no exceptions to that. It's like that's what it is, and that's it, and that's too bad, and that's it. VA, again, there is no debt to income ratio limit on a VA loan. So you can do a VA loan with, I just closed one a month ago with 112 debt to income ratio. True story, by the way. FHA, the max debt to income ratio is 56.99, and conventional, the max debt to income ratio is 50. Okay? As far as multifamilies though, and this is something that a lot of folks don't know, is when you have a multifamily that you're purchasing, and let's hypothetically say that the buyer is going to be moving into one of the units, right? And you're going to say, well, my buyer is going to move into the smallest unit because they want to maximize their rental potential and they want to get the rental income from the largest rental units, right? Your lender is going to say, so what? And they are going to qualify the loan with your buyer occupying the smaller or the largest unit and only using the rental income from the smallest or from the largest unit rather, or vice versa. Let me repeat that. Your lender is going to use the rental income in their favor, basically. So we're going to suppose that your borrower is going to be living in the highest income generating unit of that property and renting out the lowest income unit in that property. Additionally, we're only going to use 75% of whatever that property is going to generate to qualify. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a 2-unit property. The one unit is $1,000 a month. The other unit is $1,200 a month. Your customer says, I'm going to move in to the one that's $1,000 because I obviously want to rent out the one for $1,200. We are only going to use the $1,000 unit. We are not going to use the $1,200 unit to qualify. Additionally, we're only going to use 75% of that $1,000. That's how we qualify that loan, just so that everyone is kind of clear. And the way that we determine the rents on what can be used is that we are going to require a form that is called a 1007 to be ordered by the appraiser, and the appraiser is going to provide us the area comparables and that for the rents, and that is the amount that we're going to use to qualify the client.